Hi, welcome to Lecture 2, Part 2 of Module 2, which covers elementary secondary education settings, grading practices, and Clark County School District. I specifically mentioned grading practices and not grading policies because we will be reviewing the two documents that CCSD has put out there for both parents and teachers to support the governance of, balanced grading. It's a good way to put it. So our first document here is the CCSD's Balanced Assessment System created in 2017-2018. This is the version we're looking at for this PowerPoint. And the purpose of it initially is to guide instruction and improve performance for every single student. Schools must analyze and use multiple types of assessments, multiple data sources on multiple occasions. So they have it split up in a very interesting way that you'll be able to look at on your own to ensure that students are being assessed in a way that's beneficial to them and to their overall academic achievement. And you'll see the 15 Fixes supports this framework or this practice. So just get back into the PowerPoint. Here, it is intended as a connecting thread between the Nevada School Performance Framework, the School Performance Plan, and the response to instruction, the RTI plan, which I thought was interesting because this involves all students. At first, I thought maybe it was balanced assessment for a certain group of students, but from this, it alludes to the fact that this is for every student that's impacted by all of these policies and procedures that come out of the Nevada School Performance Framework and also the School Performance Plan. So here you want to really see the emphasis that all components of the BAS support high-level learning for all students regardless of the school they attend, the gender, race, ethnicity, disability, or language. And when we look at this, it's pretty clear about what is expected. So first things first is that the definition of what's formative and what's summative, which was really surprising to me, and the fact that formative is defined as assessment for learning, not necessarily based in grades. Matter of fact, it's stated that if it's for practice, it should not be graded, but students should be given feedback that is used to adjust ongoing teaching and learning strategies to improve students' self-assessment, reflection, and attainment of curricular learning. And then you have summative, which is assessment of learning. Summative assessments are often standardized tests of learning instruments and verify arrival at success. So you're using the summative assessments to create a summation of overall knowledge after you've taught a skill, after you've given students enough time to practice and you've given them feedback, or upon arrival into a course where you're assessing where they currently stand as far as skill-based wise. This type of assessment is used at the district and the classroom level. So you'll see the district implement mandatory assessments, and then you have school-wide mandatory assessments that are at the classroom level, which I thought was interesting. And if we take a look at this, it is strategically set up in a way that supports a healthy balance to how we are supposed to do things. So, for example, under formative assessments, it says use of assessment data to support learning. You are ideally supposed to differentiate and or intervene based on the identified student learning deficit to create a starting point for targeted instruction. Now, why does this matter? All of our students, to a certain extent, have some type of deficit, right? They may not be labeled as RTI. They may be a slower reader or challenge in different areas. So ideally, your formative assessments are reflective of a process by which you're ensuring that that student is obtaining the progress that is necessary in order to grow their skills. I thought it was also interesting that the responsibility role. So here, if you don't have an interventionist, obviously they wouldn't be responsible, but you are responsible for a lot of different ways in which you implement the differentiation and also the strategies within formative and also summative. So which is different from summative, where you have the administrator's role within the assessments and then a classroom teacher. Before we get to the 15 fixes, which align with this and is a brochure to fix all different ways in which we grade, make sure you take a look at the overall aspects of this chart and then see how it plays out in the arrow that we have here. And it's kind of like a year-round model for how things will work. For the kindergarten all the way to, I'm assuming high school, because they have the end of course exams, although they specify which grade level should be doing what at this level here. So pretty interesting to say the least, but it seems like, at the beginning of our year, we're starting off with formative informal classroom practice, quick checks as needed, purpose, provide actionable data for teachers to adjust instruction. So that means that that's not an area that's graded there. And then summative assessments begin sometime in about April and May. So it looks like around the wheel, if you're reading it correctly, and then a little bit district interim assessments are in between these months, September, October, and between April and May for kindergartners through third graders, and then kindergarten for between August and September. But other than that, it looks like for middle school and high school, they have a policy or practices in place that support a lot of formative assessment and then the areas where summative assessment would take place. So it really is based on the student building the skills to get to the summative. And how you assess that is supposed to be saturated with informative practices of assessment. And I'm believing, you can have some summative aspects in there. But it says here, formative, informal classroom-based assessments, daily and continuous. It says purpose is to provide actionable data for teachers to adjust instruction and to monitor student understanding and learning. So after the initial, you're doing this continuously. It's a year to end cycle where you're continuously providing formative informal based assessments. And according to CCSD, formative assessments are for learning, feedback based, not necessarily grade based. So that really struck me as interesting. You can go over that. To complement the balanced assessment system, they also include the 15 fixes for broken grades, which I thought was really interesting because it is well paired with the actual formative and summative approaches that are recommended for best practices of grading. The reason why I included this is because this is for every student. It's not just for the specified group of students, RTI, or the individual plans. Here it states the goal of each and every school is proficiency for all students. So evaluation of student achievement using similar criteria that is applied consistently will help us reach this goal. So the fixes were created to mitigate the damages of, grading practices that do not fare well for all students. So here you have fix 1, don't include student behaviors. And grades include only achievement. That means achievement summative assessments, not the actual effort and participation, and adherence to class rules, which is a hard one because why? If the student is not participating, how do you encourage them to participate without a penalty or without a consequence behind it? A lot of people use those incentives to say, you're doing really well with our weekly quizzes. Continue your efforts, participate, finish the quiz. Sometimes students, especially in high school levels, aren't motivated to do that if they don't see an actual earning of some sorts to motivate them to continue. Obviously, the motivation will be increased scores. If they're on a team or if their parents are really strict or they have a consequence at home, this is a definite determining factor. Fix 2, don't reduce marks on work submitted late. Provide support for the learner, which is different from a lot of school policies where they don't accept late work. Fix 3, don't give points for extra credit or use bonus points. Seek only evidence that more work has resulted in a higher level of achievement. Fix 4, don't punish academic dishonesty with reduced grades. Apply other consequences and reassesses to determine actual level of achievement. And that too is interesting because that takes away the notion that grades are then connected to a student's penalties for certain actions. Number 5, don't consider attendance and grade determination. Report absences separately, which is ironic on its own because if a student is absent, obviously their grade will suffer because they may not have time to do the work. So that kind of coincides with the previous fix, which is you can't punish a student for late work. That's one of the suggested fixes from CCST. Fix 6, don't include group scores in grades. Use only individual achievement evidence, which means you should be using roles within your group assignments to ensure that students are given fair grading and graded on what they're actually doing within the group work. Fix number 7, don't organize information in grading records by assessment methods or simply summarize into a single grade. Organize and report evidence by standards learning and goals. Fix 8, don't assign grades using inappropriate, unclear performance standards. Provide clear descriptions of achievement expectations. I think that one is a little bit odd because it's hard to know. It's hard to standardize something if you haven't used it a lot of times. So you actually need to be able to use it a few times to normalize the content. Fix number 9, don't assign grades based on students' achievement compared to other students. Grade student performance based on clear preset criteria that's shared in advance. 10, don't rely on evidence gathered using assessments that fail to meet standards of quality. Rely only on quality assessments. And I thought, too, that's kind of odd because how do you get a quality assessment? We had a system of creating reliability in our testing assessments within the Charlotte-Mecklenburg School District. However, it did take a lot of time and we had to consistently update it with our department head. Number 11, don't rely only on the mean. Consider other measures of central tendency and use a professional judgment. Number 12, don't include zeros in grade determination when evidence is missing or as punishment. Use alternatives such as reassessing to determine real achievement or use I for incomplete or insufficient evidence. Interesting because some school policies, as we'll see in the next lecture, do require the use of zeros. Fix number 13, don't use information from formative assessments and practice to determine grades. Use only summative evidence. So that supports the assessment balance system. Number 14, don't summarize evidence accumulated over time when learning is developmental and will grow with time and repeated opportunities. In those instances, emphasize more recent achievement. And then number 15, don't leave students out of the grading process. Involve students. They can and should play key roles in assessment and grading that promote achievement. So the fixes support the practices of the balanced assessment system, which, like I said, is interesting because it is, one can assume that this is for every student. So it looks a lot different than what some of the practices I've seen within classrooms. And don't feel bad. This information is kind of hard to find, and I think that's on purpose. So you don't find, the exact alignment of what is intended to be seen as best practices. This concludes part 2 of the lecture. I hope you read further into some of the things that were stated in the brochure, and as you prepare yourself for round 2 or the third lecture, consider the things that you've learned here and then the opinions shared in the piece that you'll see in the lecture part 2. Have a great day.